The boy stood by the roadside, his small hands trembling as they gripped the rusty handlebar of a faded blue bicycle. The midday sun burned fiercely above, but what scorched deeper was the desperation in his eyes. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, his knees scraped, and his voice cracked as he whispered words no child should ever have to say. "Buy my bike, sir. Mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days." Those words hung in the air like a fragile prayer, swallowed by the roar of engines and the indifference of a busy world that rarely slowed down to listen. If you believe that kindness still exists, that compassion can change lives, then take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness of Americans, because stories like this remind us what it truly means to be human. It all began on a hot afternoon in a small town on the outskirts of Houston. The street was dusty, lined with tiny shops and food stalls, and the faint smell of fried chicken and gasoline hung in the air. A group of bikers, known in the town for their charity rides and weekend gatherings, had stopped by a roadside cafe to grab some iced tea. They were rough-looking men, tattooed arms, leather jackets, loud laughter, but behind the noise was a shared brotherhood that believed in helping others whenever they could. As they joked and teased each other, one of them, Jake, noticed something unusual near the edge of the road. A boy, no older than 10, stood beside a bicycle that looked older than him. He wasn't playing or riding it. He was trying to sell it. Jake couldn't look away. There was something haunting about the way the boy's eyes darted between passing cars, his small face hopeful yet terrified of rejection. Every few seconds he would wipe his sweaty forehead with the back of his hand and adjust the chain that kept slipping off the gear. People passed him, glanced briefly, then moved on. No one stopped. No one cared. Jake excused himself from his friends and walked toward the boy. When he got closer, the sight hit him like a punch. The boy's lips were dry, his cheeks hollow, and there was dirt smudged across his neck. He clutched a piece of cardboard on which he had written in shaky letters with a blue marker, "Bike for sale, cheap." Jake knelt down, trying not to scare him, and asked gently, "Why are you selling it, buddy?" The boy's voice quivered, almost breaking, as he said, "I need money. Mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days. I tried to get her food, but no one wants to buy my bike." Jake froze. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of 1,000 heartbreaks. Inside the cafe, the other bikers noticed Jake talking to the boy. One by one, they stepped out. Mike, the oldest among them, who had lost his daughter years ago. Chris, who had grown up in foster care, and Dylan, the loudest but kindest of them all. They gathered quietly, watching as Jake placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Where's your mom, kid?" he asked softly. The boy pointed across the street toward a small, broken-down house at the end of the alley. The windows were cracked, the roof patched with old tarps, and a stray cat lay sleeping on the porch. They followed him there. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of damp wood and hunger. On a thin mattress lay a woman, pale, weak, her hair tangled and her breathing shallow. The room had barely anything in it, a chair, a few empty cans, and a small photo of the boy and his mother smiling, taken in better days. The woman tried to sit up when she saw them, but her strength failed. "Mom," Jake said softly, "we're not here to hurt you. We just wanted to help." She smiled faintly and shook her head. "We don't need charity," she whispered. "I just lost my job. My boy tried to sell his bike so I could eat. I told him not to, but he wouldn't listen." Tears welled in Jake's eyes. He turned back to the group, and they didn't need words. They all knew what had to be done. Mike left immediately and came back with food from the cafe: sandwiches, water, fruit, and a box of fried chicken. The woman cried as she watched her son devour a piece of bread with trembling hands, his eyes closing in relief after days of starvation. "Slow down, son," she said, smiling weakly. "There's enough now." But her voice broke at the end of the sentence. She didn't know who these men were or why they cared, but in that moment their presence felt like a miracle. As the day went on, the bikers learned the truth. Her name was Maya, a single mother who had once worked as a nurse in a local clinic. When the clinic shut down unexpectedly, she lost everything: her job, her savings, even her dignity. Her husband had abandoned them years earlier, and her family had turned their backs after she refused to remarry. For weeks, she had searched for work, doing odd cleaning jobs just to keep her child fed. But when she fell ill with pneumonia and couldn't work, everything spiraled. Rent went unpaid, bills piled up, and she sold whatever she could: furniture, clothes, even utensils, until all that was left was her son's bike. That evening, the bikers sat with her on the porch, listening to her story as the sun dipped behind the horizon. The boy sat between Jake and Mike, clutching his now unsellable bike, his head resting on Jake's arm. "You're a brave little man," Jake said quietly. "You were ready to give up the only thing you had for your mum." The boy nodded and said, "It's just a bike. Mommy's more important." Those words broke something inside each of them. The kind of pain that comes from realizing how unfair life can be and how strong love truly is when it has nothing left to give. That night, the bikers went home but couldn't sleep. They messaged each other in their group chat, planning something extraordinary. The next morning they returned, not just with food this time, but with hope. Mike had called in a few favors, Chris had talked to a local clinic, and Dylan had reached out to their charity network. Within a few hours, they had arranged a small fundraiser in town. The bikers parked their shiny motorcycles in a circle outside the cafe, put up signs, and spread the word, "Help a mother and her son. Every dollar counts." They played music, shared the story of Maya and her little boy, and the people began to come. Some brought money, others brought food, and a few simply offered prayers. By the end of the day, they had collected enough to pay her rent for 6 months, stock her kitchen, and even enroll her in a new nursing job at a private clinic. When Jake handed her the envelope of cash, Maya's hands shook. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered through tears. "You don't have to," he said gently. "Just promise me you'll never give up again." Weeks passed, and Maya slowly regained her strength. The color returned to her cheeks, and her laughter filled the small house again. Her son, whose name was Ethan, started going back to school, his bike freshly painted blue by the bikers themselves, who visited every weekend to check on them. Sometimes they'd take Ethan for short rides around the neighborhood, his tiny helmet shining in the sun as he grinned ear to ear. He told everyone, "These are my uncles. They saved my mommy." Months later, during one of their charity rides, the bikers were joined by Maya herself, now in her nurse's uniform, handing out water and food to homeless people on the streets. She had become part of their circle, not because she owed them anything, but because she understood what it meant to be seen, to be helped, and to help others in return. When asked by a reporter why she did it, she smiled and said, "Because kindness saved my life." That night, as the bikers sat by a campfire after the ride, Jake looked at Ethan sitting happily on his mother's lap and thought about the first time he had seen him by that road. Sometimes, life doesn't need grand miracles, just people who care enough to stop, listen, and act. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness of Americans. And remember, one small act of kindness can change an entire life.